I was hoping for a sunshiny day in early October because it seems like we make our annual trek up here to see the leaves. We're back in Dannemora at the home of Terry Gilroy, our good friend and mentor and historian and the man who, what did I say, knows more than he's forgotten more than I'll ever know, I said in a recent newspaper column of mine, so the pressure is on you today, baby, to perform. How are you, Terry?
Well, like always, up and around, and always appreciate your coming up here.
Great to be here. We got a rainy day, and we don't even care. The forecast is for snow showers in the mountains this weekend. We have had such incredible early fall weather, though, haven't we?
Well, you look out here. Here it is, the 5th of October.
I think it is.
And the flowers are still blooming, and we've left many time with the white all over.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. We had I was just talking with somebody on the phone this morning. Maybe less than a week ago, about a week ago, we had what was pretty good frost that came whipping down through. I had to scrape the windshield before I went to 7:30 Mass on a Sunday morning and got back, and I said, there goes my tomatoes, there goes... I looked out, and they never got touched.
Never got touched, oh.
I guess the whole frost was on my windshield down there in Morrison.
Yes, we've been very fortunate. I said, leaves have just started to turn. You can see across the street there.
Oh, yeah.
And well, I said before, we live in such a beautiful section of this great country. And when we had our Navy reunion down here in '91 in Plattsburgh, and we went out on Lake Champlain with good Frank, Captain Frank, and these people were, I may have said before, just amazed that the beauty of the mountains and the lake and the weather we had that particular weekend was just outstanding. And they were from all over the eastern part of this country, and it's a Chamber of Commerce could have been there, but they weren't. But I think a lot of them come back. So
well, hopefully a lot of people, in spite of all the great tragedies that happened earlier in September this year, people are still coming to see the leaves in the North Country, and we do have a great place to live. And we, Calvin and I, take every opportunity to promote this area because it's spectacular. And sometimes we tend to take things for granted when we walk down the same streets every day until somebody else comes from out of town. My brother visited a few weeks ago. He came because he graduated from Messina High School 50 years ago, and they had their big reunion, and he looked up here and he said, it's great to be back, just to see this great North Country. And he lives in a pretty area of Pennsylvania, but there's nothing like going back home.
We appreciate it a lot. Of course, we leave and go to Florida, and then when we come back in the spring, green is green. I mean, down there you had green, but it wasn't the green that we have here. And it isn't a flat land that you look over. I was up to Maggie's Pharmacy one day there, and I looked out, and I was standing there, and Leo come along. He said, what are you looking for? I said, well, I'm looking at Whiteface and that which is beyond to the south. Oh, he said, I go by here, and he said, I forget that. He said, in and out, but...
Isn't that amazing? How can you forget Whiteface? It's the focus for all of us. The reason we're sitting here today is because we like to come in here. We've done some of our best programs around tables. Did you notice that? Mostly kitchen tables and living room tables and dining room tables. But we enjoy being here. But we're here for a specific reason, and that is to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the village of Dannemora. And those people who've been watching this program from the beginning saw the parade that was held on what date?
Well, we got it right here. We had
you got it in black and white?
In July. And we had it on the 22nd of July. And so this is what we're putting together here. Some of the things that I have accumulated over the years that I have never, well, I don't think anybody has seen them. And I would like to share them with the people. I originally planned to do a once a week a program in which I would develop the certain things that village life has here, the railroads, the prison, the churches, the schools, and that thing, but I never got to it, so this will suffice for that, I think. And
it's the old round to it, remember? Where
Yeah.
did I see on one of the Dairy Queen or somewhere, We have round to it. So
Right.
we're gonna get around to it. We're getting around to it now. And a lot of people, I'm sure, especially those who aren't from Dannemora, would like to learn a little bit more about its history. We've done several programs with you down through the years and covered a lot of aspects of it, but in the last 100 years, some pretty neat things have happened around here. So why don't you take us on our little history tour? Anywhere you want to go, we'll follow you.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things, not only the village people here of Dannemora, but all our area, the citizens are the same. You know, they're church-going people. They're really civic-minded. As a matter of fact, when money was raised here, I was really surprised what the Red Cross picked up from our area for the disaster in New York.
Isn't that amazing?
But Dannemora may be different in the fact that we have here our main source of employment, of course, is the state, and they've used us and we've used them over these years. And right now, I said the other thing that makes it a little bit different is that we're here in Dannemora, and what we have in the village itself is somewhat different in elevation than a lot of other places. And we have our families that have grown here, and once they leave, but you don't, like a lot of places, you don't forget to pull all of the stakes up. You always come back and want to see who was here in Dannemora, and like you did with when you had with the Rhodes family. And sure, I knew them.
That was so neat. For the benefit of our viewers who may not read the Press Republican, I write a column there, and I've done that for 4 years, ever since I left the radio business. And I'll just tell the story only briefly, and then we'll get on, because it's part of the history of Dannemora. My wife handed me a sheaf of poems. I had no idea where I'd gotten those poems. And there was a name. It was Helian Rhodes. Now, how many other Helian Rhodes do you think there are in the world? So I went on the internet and just typed that name. And I was connected with a website of a church in Los Angeles, California, and a minister by the name of Schuyler Rhodes. It just happened that in 2000 or 2000, I guess, he wrote a sermon and included his wonderful grandmother from the backwoods of northern New York, and what a great person she was, and so on, and talked about her, and she had written these poems. And I had no idea where they came from until I called my friend right up here in Dannemora, and Terry said, well, of course. Yeah. He'd gave Dave the whole story of how Clifford came here and when they built the new powerhouse for the jail, went through the whole process, and one by one, I contacted family members based on the information Terry gave me, and found out that in the 1970s, I had gone down to a local, I think it was Meadowbrook Nursing Home, with my tape recorder, and I did an interview with her before she died. Now, whether she gave me those poems at that time or somebody gave them to me later, but the way that's, based on your information, the way that story came together made a delicious newspaper column. So isn't it nice when you can remember family connections in a town this size?
Yeah, and I said, the thing is that never realized that this woman had done this. Now, her son, who Reverend James Rhodes, as I showed you there, his obituary
He
notice.
showed me the obituary when I walked in the door today.
He was in school with us, so we know the Rhodes, all of them, Don and Charlie, and so the one thing leads to another, and you get into it, and it's so interesting when you get in. I'm not in the internet, but when these people come back and they realize, well, we know where Dannemora is. Like one time, I got down in Florida, we were stopped by the state police down there in Florida. State police are doing a road check, and the state trooper come up and asked for the license, so I showed it to him, and he said, where's Dannemora? I said, well, it's in northern New York. Well, he said, I lived on Long Island. He said, I never heard of it. Well, I said, you lived a good life then. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you knew where Dannemora was, you'd know that that's where the prison was. So he started to laugh. He said, well, I guess I did. But the name is out there, and, it's always been something that Northern New York, from 1845, we've always been associated. That's why we got started. And that's basically why I put this book out here, The Village People of Dannemora. I kind of stole it from the village, Greenwich Village. But I had these people that were, and what I did with this, I put together from the very beginning of the village in 1845, chronologically that which took place in Dannemora as the years went down through. I think there's 40-some pages of material here, 47. And I ended it in 1945 when the war's over with and we're all back home. And we had two individuals who, their two names did not return. They were Frederick Agony and Donald Borey. Donald's body was returned and he lies in St. Joseph Cemetery. What happened to Fred, I do not know, but I found out since then that he was brought back to Keysville and is buried in the family plot down there. So those are the only two we lost in World War II. But I did this chronologically with the events that took place, and some of them we'll look at today. And some of the people want to know, how can I get that book? Well, we printed it and it went out of print. And if you can, I've let others take it to make copies, but it wasn't like Gone with the Wind. It wasn't the bestseller. But I had some good help with my daughter, George Rabideau's wife, and my grandson, and Mrs. Mayette. We all worked together on it as one of the things that we did to put Dannemora, the village history, in its position.
These are wonderful labors of love, and I want to pause just for a minute to congratulate you and everybody else who did input into this, because this is what makes these little historical things click. We've covered a lot of the 100s, the sesquicentennials, the bicentennials, and even the tercennials, 300 years of many of the little towns and villages around northern New York, and it takes somebody spearheading a campaign to get it done. We went to one of my old hometowns in Moira last summer, where they've now just started this Heritage Days. Here we are, it's only the second annual Heritage Day in Dannemora, because all of a sudden we have a group of people who are saying we better let people know about this history before it's too late. And you've been connected with history here for how long?
Well, I was a village historian for 30 years, so
there you
it
go.
just grew on me.
Give you an idea. It grew on you all right. But the idea, I think, and one of the great purposes of this program is to inspire young people to help preserve the history of where they live, preserve the history of their families, because how many times do you see family history going to the dump?
Yeah.
I mean, the written history, the photographs that nobody bothers to write on, the parents and grandparents who forget that it's important to leave that oral history recorded on videotape or audio tape so your descendants will have something to hang their hats on.
Well, that's why I commend you fellas for doing what you're doing, and I know that you do a tremendous job, and I certainly enjoy all the programs. I don't care what it is. I enjoy them and sit there and watch them and hope that somebody else will pick up the thing and go with it, because you do this. And we have lost, in a sense, some of this connection. Having done the World War II, I see the difference in the print from that time to this time, where you used to have a lot of information relative to local happenings, and you can't find that today. It's just not there. And so this is basically the whole thing that will hold this together, and it'll be appreciated even more so down through the years as people understand it, that there's where you go to get that information.
I'm laughing because I love old newspapers, and so do you. And we look at old newspapers from the 1800s and early 1900s, and they had, when they say gossip columns, they had gossip columns. And when they talked about, the Gilroys in Dannemora, the Gilroys had their son and daughter-in-law up from so-and-so for the weekend, and they had a turkey dinner, and they went Tuesday afternoon, they visited so-and-so. And we were talking about that at a big meeting I was in the other day, and hometown newspapers, and how delicious it was to just know who did what, and not just who had a baby and who died, but who went to visit and what happened to them. And those are great little pieces to remember.
Well, digressing there a second, doing stuff on World War II, and I said, here's a gas situation where it's tight, and you weren't to do this and that and the other thing. But this family here, they always, every week, they wound up in the column having gone to visit his parents over in this place. And where did he get the gas tickets?
Where did he get those coupons?
Well, people look at it and say, well, he had gas coupons? Oh, yeah. But one of the things and then I did, putting these things together, this was a book that I did here from 1844 to 1864, which is on the village, and it's the early accounts of what transpired here. Now, I have a series of these.
Work here, Terry.
It's actually pre-village, though.
That's before the village,
pre-village.
right?
It starts out with these things relating about the prison, and we go up in through to just the beginning of the Civil War. But what I'm saying here is that this stuff is in the microfilms if people want to get into it. And it's not only that which happened here, but as you will see here, like births. 9th of August, 1845.
Yep.
Now you get life here in the community that you don't find today, and people look at it and begin to wonder, are you sure that's what's, well, I'm reading it right here, it's not my print that's there. And then my other one was Mary Fogarty that got me started on this. It's a town historian
Our friend
in
Mary,
Plattsburgh.
sure.
And she started doing that for the town. Well, then I wind up in 1999, and this is the last that I put together here of the same type of stuff. So you can see where the village is going, what we are doing with it, the people who have passed on, their obituary notices. Life in general for the small community is preserved in here, and it should be kept.
Well, it's got to be kept.
And this is the thing. I think one of the things is, personally, that historians don't get enough credit in the sense that from their governing agency that they're allowed to do this, that, the other thing. When people want this information, you got to have some place that's available, but to give you the things that you need to get this done. I said you go down and you spend probably 30 hours of research doing a month in the old newspaper when there was 6 newspapers. Now it's 7, and it's that much more.
We're going to pause for just a moment. Yeah, we took a brief hiatus there for a telephone call. We got a picture of that pretty tree across the road and let people know that we are in God's country up here. And yeah, we think maybe his hand extends over where we live down in Morrisonville and where Calvin lives up in Champlain once in a while. But he probably started it all right up here in Dannemora, don't you think?
He went from here, and then he improved other places, but we're going to bring that in. Well,
So what do you got here?
This is what was known as, in Clinton County, as the Canadian and Nova Scotia Refugee Tract. And it's an irregular piece of ground that extends all the way from the town of Champlain to all the various towns down here into Saranac and Schuyler Falls. And here's what was written in the history of the town of Ellenburg. And it was to compensate the veterans of the American Revolution, and it was given them, this land was given them on their rank and years of service. And in September 10th of 1787, New York State set aside the Canadian Nova Scotia Refugee Tract. This irregular tract includes land in Champlain, Chazy, Moores, Altona, Dannemora, Plattsburgh, Schuyler Falls, and Saranac. And so these individuals, once they got out of service, were given land tracts here in this particular area. The others, of course, here's the Beatman, Patton, and Doers, Patton, and these. The thing was that I had here the VFW of 1975. They did a series each month on the American Revolution. This is here shows like General Montgomery. And the one thing here that we understand with the Canadians and the Nova Scotians who decided to come down and be part of the American Revolution. They were told up there by a bishop in Montreal that if they joined the American forces, they were going to be excommunicated, which I think was a lot of. I don't have the individual's name. But this is what it was. And so here we are, the people who were living here. Our deed shows that we, right here, are in the Canadian Nova Scotia refugee tract. And this is part of our connection with history from the past. And not only that, then when we get into this part of our history, we come up with the fact that Dannemora, when it got started, we moved in, and 1845 up through to 1878, there was only a few ways to get in and out, and one of them was to go over to Ellenburg, where the Dannemora crossing was. Now, when you talk to what's the name over in Moira, and you were kind enough to get his name from, I had that booklet and not this history here, but another one on Ellenburg, talking about the railroad at the Dannemora crossing on the Lake Champlain Ogdensburg Railroad. And I sent it to him, and he said that he had never come across this, which one individual can help another individual with this stuff.
Sure. Do all the time.
And a lot of people don't realize that it's there. Let's see what they do with it. Well, here it is here. This is the New York State Gazetteer, and they said, when you come down, this is all divided by the areas. Here's here's our area here. Here's Plattsburgh, Champlain. Here's Ellenburg. Now here's the town line. The plank road goes down here. And here, Route 11. And right here is the Dannemora crossing. It's just a short distance north of the turnpike, as you would head north to the Ellenburg Depot. It's on the left-hand side. This allowed the prison to receive the necessary stuff that we needed to operate with. Why there wasn't something here earlier, I don't know. But from 1845 to 1878, that was the main way. Now, a lot of people say, well, you could go on to Plattsburgh. You could have. But if you look at the topography from the Dannemora crossing, it isn't that bad until you get to the mile and a half up the mountain. And then the other history for the town of Ellenburg, which the Catholic Daughters put out, it does mention these wagons coming down loaded with iron, which was the main reason was here. And it got to the point where they said, well, we just can't feasibly operate this place without something better. So that's when they decided they would come through and put the railroad in. And in so doing, it was interesting. They decided to put the railroad here, which I think kept this place going. If it hadn't been for the railroad, the trees probably would have reclaimed the land and there'd been nothing here because...
That's true so many areas,
yeah.
Right?
And it gets into conflict here in the county. And I said I got some of the reports I went through and dug them up where these people are looking, well, they're giving their influence to the committee to locate this railroad from Plattsburgh. And they said, well, now, we don't, not going to name names, but we don't want you to go through that community because they only got 2 grist mills over there. And you ought to come through ours because we have more to offer than they have. And you can see the conflict going on between these people because up to that point, you had very few limited ways to get to Plattsburgh. Now, all of a sudden, this railroad is going to come in, and it's going to mean that difference to you. You can get in and get out. The prison, you could get your product out, which by that time is pretty well down, but to still have the transfer of inmates and things, and like with the railroad, it was up through to probably in in the 1970-75 before they changed that system over to bring in buses. So the lifeline at the Dannemora crossing on the Lake Champlain and Ogdenburg Railroad was important to the village people, and it brought all of these things. There's at the college, I've located the reports year by year of what come in more or less on there, and you can see that lifeline existed strictly for the institution, and we just had to do something different, and eventually they did. They come up with the railroad, and what was it? I got the book here on where did the tracks go. This is Michael Kudich wrote this, and he did a tremendous thing. I think probably a lot of people have seen that from that. But he documents each of the places here and all of the lines that were there. So anybody that wants to do this stuff on the railroad, it's important to understand that, even to the point where, like, I come home in 1943, and we went into Utica and then up the back way, and that was still in operation then, and they're doing a reclaim now for that. But the railroad was the important transit. Here, this is a book here which I just happened to receive. It's Dr. Altina Waller did on the Smith Weed, and this is more or less all on the railroad itself and how he developed this from Plattsburgh to Dannemora. It's important to understand the political aspects of what happened during that particular time, and all of these things wind together to make a story, and sometimes it's not the best ending, but at least you find out what did transpire during that particular time. I don't have the photos that were printed, but there were some here.
That's kind of a neat engine.
Yeah. The
Rainbow, what does that say? Narrow gauge.
Narrow gauge.
Turn it a little more so he can get it with the camera over there.
It's the
boy, that's great.
CRR. Okay. And this, I don't know where. Now some of this stuff comes to me, and I should mark it better than I do, but I don't, and I don't have that which given this. Of course, they're not the best of photos. This is 1880, yeah, Chateauguay Railroad, 1887. You can see and here's another one, and coming into Lion Mountain, the train coming to the station in Lion Mountain, which now they have turned into a historical thing up there, which is great. And it was important method right up through here to when they, after the war, to change these things. Of course, the trucks come in, the tire inner tube come in and took the trucks. Right.
I watched a wonderful special on trucks. You know how when you're flipping the channels, I got one on trucks. The history of trucking in the United States, and I didn't realize what a tremendous transition there was when they went from the hard rubber tires to the tires that you put air in.
Yep.
That revolutionized the whole business for one reason or another. There was a lot of resistance to it because, how can we ever put those big loads on pneumatic tires? It's going to blow the tires, and it was a great program. I tell you, really get going. But with the trucking industry and the railroads in Dannemora, the railroads are something that's very important, and thank goodness there are a number of people who are interested in tracing the history of railroading here in northern New York. You get connected with a few of them. I get connected with a few of them, and I'm looking forward to some of the new stuff, research that people are doing. That's good.
Because the individual you had in one of your columns, I had been in touch with him. Yeah. And I sent him some of the things that I had. Like I say, these reports in the newspaper, it's all this building of the railroad up through here. And what they did here was the state got into the contract with the state, and they used inmates on this part, and then let general labor take over from Plattsburgh. And one of the things that never developed, I didn't find the names, but one of the odd things was that they had the railroad up here, And evidently, it's like a lot of things. These young people wanted to find out what this was, this new venture, and so the engineers showed them. And one night, the kids went down and decided, well, let's see if this will work.
Oh boy.
So they chugged the engine up and down the track, tore it up, and nobody, there was no names mentioned, so Grandpa was still safe. And not only that, then here about 20 years ago, I laugh at because there was a bunch of fellas went down and took on the school buses and did the same thing. So you got 80 years in between, but there are 100 years in between, but the things are still people doing the same thing, all over.
Well, yeah, our viewers, I'm sure, are a little confused when we talk about the village of Dannemora being 100 years old. We're talking about 1901 to 2001, and yet a lot of what you've been talking about predates that. So let's explain how the village finally became an incorporated village.
Well, as the institutions increased, you start out with the prison, and as normal, people just decided they're going to go on the other side of the law, and it kept increasing, and they needed more space. And to save the taxpayers' money, they had their money invested here in the prison. You had Auburn, you had Sing Sing, and Dannemora. Those were the three major prisons. And so they just kept improving this and pouring money into it. The mining wasn't really working out because they had intended to put the inmates to work, earning a living, in a sense, for the institution, but it wasn't the best arrangement there. Other places they could have done better. But Dannemora just kind of grew, in a sense, like Topsy. And we come up with the fact that we had this institution here. Well, as one of the increases come along, they decided to cut the water off. The water here for the village was the village residents. It wasn't the village at that time. It was, and we had just a system where people were going around and buying water from out of barrels that were on the back of horse-drawn vehicles and things. And so they told the people here that you got to do something because we're going to open that new institution next door, that state hospital, and we're going to use that water because we don't have sufficient. There wasn't any line to Chazy Lake at that time. So people here looked at it, and like a lot of us, they procrastinated and said, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll do that. So they gave them a year, and when they decided to cut the water off, nothing had been done. Well, we all work over there, and they're not going to cut us off from water. Well, they gave them a few more weeks and said, well, we better get something done. And they come back again, and there was nothing done. So they shut the water off, which made situations here quite touchy, and located this stuff in doing the research. And they said, well, you're going to have to do it. So that's when they got started. The people here, let's get together and we'll form a community, a village form of government, and start our own water. Sue Botsford's had some notices in the Press Republican here in the 100-year column.
And the look back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it documents this thing here. The thing was that the same way here with electricity, when the state decided to electrocute inmates up here, they were the only ones that had electricity. And when they didn't have any use for that electricity to eliminate the convicts, they were willing to sell it to the people here on this side of the street. So it's been a mutual thing where they have had the ability through state taxpayers to get this stuff. We've come into it, and lately we've diversified ourselves to that point. That's where the village itself is formed to do this and have our own say, in a sense, as to what happens.
That gives us a little bit of history about how the village was formed, but what I wanted to let our viewers know that there were people living in Dannemora long before the year 1901, and you proved that to us today. The first settlers came here when?
Possibly well, I think there was others here. The first we have of documentation, the census record, 1840, in the town of Beekmantown. This was formed in 1854 off in Beekmantown. The census records, it doesn't show you the people where they were living, other than what if there was that many people here working the mines, and that way you could disseminate like a Hooper or these people, that there was nobody in Beekmantown doing it, but you knew that it was being done here. And I don't think that there was really that many that were living here. I haven't been able to come up with anything really positive in that line to show this. So that's why I haven't gotten into it to that degree. When the state decided they were going to put the prison here, then you can come up with the expenditure of state money in Albany, and you can find the like I had in that other book, where this is what happened after that. And I said people were happy to come here and live and see what was here and exist. And then when they said, well, we're going to use that water and the facilities for those next door, that brought the crunch time down to a point where you had to do something, and they eventually did. So that's why the village got started.
All right, what do you got here? I'm looking at some great old pictures here.
Well, one of the things I'd like to get into, Dannemora itself, in a sense, we were in contact here a few years ago. I thought maybe the mayor would come down, Bill Donoghue, for Dannemora. The name we have.
Turn it a little bit more so the camera can get it. Yep.
Dannemora is a combination of words. The people who in Sweden went up there to mine the iron products for the King of Sweden were Danes. D-A-N-E-S. So D-A-N-N-E. Those people from Denmark.
Never made that contact.
Yeah.
Connection.
And it's Dannemora, Sweden is northwest of Stockholm. And M-O-R-A it was a type of tree native to that particular area of Sweden. Why it was named Dannemora, I don't know. But it does. That's and we were in touch this is 1974. Bill Donoghue and I, that's when I started out as the historian. We were in contact with him, and we did have some.
Nice jacket, by the way.
Yeah,
I love it. I had one just like that about the same time.
Covered my back. But we had I should point out, this here is what I'm holding, and we put it in a time capsule. Was a piece of iron ore that they had sent from Dannemora, Sweden. There's a little medallion on there that they were kind enough. They sent us two of them. I left one at the village office, which we put into the time capsule. And the second one, I can't find it. I don't know what happened to it. It's one of the things you get sometimes. People will borrow these things. And
that's the last you ever saw of it, huh? Yeah, I know how that goes.
This is about the same thing in a sense, where the same picture, but this is what we had. They had a thing over there in the Swedish newspaper relative to Denmark. I can't translate it, but it's there anyway. So that's where the name Dannemora comes from.
You see, I never knew that until now. I knew I came up here for a good reason, Terry. That's very interesting.
And I have photos from over there showing the mining, and really in essence it's an open pit over there, and if you looked at it you could almost say you see Lime Mountain, with the photographs, the town hall and all the photographs. So that's where Dannemora came. This one here is a topography of the village. It probably doesn't come out that well. I intended to publish a book and put this in here because it shows the lines of the community. Up through here at the top of the hill, here's the prison right here. Up at the top here, you find a line of 1,600 feet. And down here at the intersection with just below the elementary school, you'll find 1,200. So in other words, there's 400 feet drop between the top of the hill up here and that which is down there. And this, you're talking about a mile.
Yeah.
So it interesting to the degree, to me, why, in a sense, we're a little different in that it allows you some things that other places don't have. Here's one here. You're looking south here.
Oh, what a great picture. I love it.
Here's Terry Mountain in the background. This is Manley Street here. Looking down what was the railroad through here, going to the Lime Mountain. Kids sliding. Of course, they don't do that today. And, you know, people look at you and say, well, of course, we were talking about yesterday when I got a haircut. You used to go out there and have a lot of the winter fun. And that sliding today, you just one of those things that has gone by the board.
Well, they do a little sliding down at Fox Hill down in town, but they have very few people have sleds like that one right there, huh? And I've told that story about the flexible flyer and how we dreamed for that for years. And one Christmas morning we woke up and there was still no flexible flyer under the tree, you know. My dad was poor.
Yeah.
He let us go almost all day until somebody walked out on the front porch and said, "Hey, how'd that sled get on our front porch?" Flexible flyer, big one, like a 6-footer,
Yeah.
you know. And it's always been a delicious memory. My brother was up here. I'm sorry to do all these side stories, but my brother was up here and we ran into a bag of old photographs neither one of us had seen in 50 years. And there was a picture of he and I and our parents standing out front. And I look in the background and there's that flexible flyer leaning up against the porch. So my kids and grandchildren and great-grandchildren knew I didn't lie. So that's kind of neat. What else have you got there?
Well, it's like a lot of things. There was probably a lot of the flexible. Mine is up overhead there.
Oh, you got one
Oh,
still?
sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
come on.
But
I
when
should have known.
Dannemora, when you had this elevation, that's why I showed you that, the difference in
Sure.
elevation. Now, we had another individual, and he used to go down to the railroad station and take the mail up to the post office. And in that 400 feet drop, we had this fellow here, he decided one night to take the sled he had and go up there as a sleigh up at the top of the hill, and we dropped that 400 feet down through the village, and there was a whole slew of us on there. You know, I mean, we hit the railroad track down there, and it's wondered we didn't all fly. But that was winter fun in a sense, this stuff here. And the other streets, accordingly, what allowed you to do this. Today, of course, the streets are sanded, and there's the vehicles there. We did the same thing when they opened up 374 up through to Shazy Lake, the new route. The old route went up by the state barn. But we did that, and we had homemade bobsleds and started up there to the top of the spring, and in many cases wound up down almost to Katyville.
Come on.
Oh, yeah. See, there was very little traffic.
Isn't that amazing?
And that's, yeah. Well,
Wow. Yeah, that's a long walk back.
well, we were that smart. Grandpa wasn't doing anything. Would you come down and pick us up? So these people would come down. Conwell Curie's son lives next door there. They would come down, had the car, and hook it back up and take it back up to the top of the mountain.
And tow it back up,
Yeah.
huh?
But that would, like I say, a lot of the winter fun.
What's a baseball team there?
Well, yeah, this is 1915. When you're talking here with Lion Mountain, you can see here, again, the same thing here. A lot of the community spirit showed over in sports. I got the names here. I don't know really who each of these individuals is, but you can see here's one D for Dannemora, and this one up here is this Tupper Lake.
Yep.
Probably was an import. You know, we weren't restrictive to letting people come in and join with us in our sports programs, but you can see uniforms. Well, it was best whatever you can pick up.
Whatever you had, sure.
That was it. Which brings up, as I should hear, the baseball, and that this roster list. We had one fellow from Dannemora who did play Major League Baseball, and you can see here. I have it under.
You can see it. Man, that's tiny.
Bill McCory
Oh,
played with the St. Louis Browns.
Well, We got some big McCory's from Schuyler Falls and
West
Morrison,
Platts-
Moore and
yeah.
West Plattsburgh.
Yeah,
I
Bob.
see Bob McCory's name all
Well, this is
all
Dick's
over the
uncle.
place.
This is Dick's uncle.
Dick's uncle.
And he didn't
We've
stay
been
that.
athletes for a long time. That family. Yeah.
He didn't stay that long in Major League Baseball, but he did have quite a career in baseball itself. He wound up his life when he was the travel manager for the New York Yankees.
Ah.
But he did manage the Plattsburgh Majors, the Albany Senators, and a number of these other teams that at that time were playing baseball. This is a good guide, though, digressing, because if you look up these players, you can see some of the old major leaguers that were played with Plattsburgh and things. So that's one of the few. And I said, with that program you did in Lime Mountain and all these people, it was so interesting because the communities themselves, this is one of the things that expresses a community. We didn't get into baseball in Dannemora to the degree Lime Mountain did. We got more or less into basketball. And when you look at that, the community in basketball, the sports, we had a priest here by the name of Father Booth. And Father Booth was a chaplain in a prison. And he'd come out of New York, and he was very instrumental to the youth movement. And he showed these guys how to play basketball, how to pivot, and all that stuff. And he was instrumental. And it got the people interested in this. Now, you're going to have basketball December, January, February, March, which is your worst months of the year. And the people could go down there and sit in an auditorium, fairly warm, and have competition. And then what was in the newspaper, we're going to beat this team or that team, coming from Ross's Point or Plattsburgh High School. And the community and the people would bind together. And they did. There was sometimes when it overflowed.
Sometimes they really bound together, huh?
Well, Wally Squires found the bottom of the stairs one night here, and this individual didn't like one of his decisions. Push him down the stairs. But those things.
I've heard all the stories from Dannemora and Lion Mountain in basketball games 40, 50 years ago. Some of them we probably would do well not to repeat here, because some of the individuals are still alive.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. Yeah, and when we centralized, then that sports program is gone, and you've lost a lot of that adhesion here in the village.
Communities, yeah. A
Yeah,
lot of things happen when schools
Yeah.
centralize.
You change your criteria, and that's what I said. It was interesting to that degree that sports did take over here. And I said we had some good basketball teams, and it's always one of those things where if you don't have that, people look for something else to do. You had here the movies. Of course, you don't travel outside in the 30s and 40s. Churches were very important.
Yes.
I can remember here when in St. Joseph's Church we had during Lent every night in Lent there was services, and everybody went, and after that was over, then the rest of the life would start, basketball and this stuff, and then these people would get to that, and when the continuity, knowing that there's services, the Methodist Church the same way. You had people go there and they participated and they knew their neighbors. Today, with freedom that come through, like with the inner tube, for trucks and cars, people would get out and go someplace else rather than participate. And a lot of it dropped in the small communities.
Communication being I use communication in the larger sense, not only being able to get information from elsewhere, but to go. Transportation is a part of communication, and so life became fractionalized. And I find it interesting to be sitting here in early October 2001, realize what has happened since the terrible tragedies of September 11th, and getting the communities thinking about getting back together, people not being afraid, and I'm certainly not afraid to talk about religious themes on this program. People all of a sudden discovered that they might like to say a prayer for themselves and the rest of humanity, and people getting out there who've never had a flag on their lawn who are scrounging to all of a sudden put a bracket on the front of the house or dig a hole for a flagpole. And a lot of these things that you and I have been talking about for years, and especially here today and talking about history of communities, sometimes either because we decide to or because we're forced to by this horrible tragedy, the communities are deciding, hey, it's not a bad idea to get together and do these community things or these neighborhood things or these county things, you know?
Well, it has. It brought people together to the realization that, you may not actually know any of those individuals, but really, in essence, you know them all because we're all in a community of humanity, and that's what makes us so great. And when you hear the stories of these individuals who did what they did, then you understand the sacrifice that they went through.
Well, you take a community the size of Dannemora, and I dare say that there are more than one family in Dannemora that's somehow been touched by those tragedies because they knew somebody or because they had a son-in-law or a cousin or a niece or a nephew who worked in the World Trade Centers, or they knew somebody who was on one of those airplanes that met a tragic demise that day. So yeah, when something like that touches so many thousands of people, it touches communities, even the smallest Dannemora.
Oh, sure. Like I say, like you say, you get on the internet and find it. Like the community here,
Oh, look at this.
This is one of the tragic...
Turn that just a little bit more for him. 5 Dannemora High School students drowned.
Now, this is, again, the newspaper accounts, as I put them together on 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper so we could have it and put it in book form. But these people the kids went up to Gold Line Mountain on a class project, and they come back down through and had an awful storm there on the west side of Chazy Lake, and 5 of them drowned. And it was
What year would that be? Do we have any clue?
Oh, yeah. This is 19... I've got it here someplace. I don't...
Wow.
Oh,
It's a Plattsburgh Daily News, so it's a while ago.
Maybe it's on this. I should have put the date on. Well, it doesn't show up that good now, but this is a copy of that which was in there at that time. I think 1929 seems to me maybe.
Could be.
Yeah.
It's not vital. I didn't mean to put you on the spot,
No.
but I just knew that it was quite a long time ago.
Yeah. But that was one of the things here as a community. People suffered with in a sense. And the thing was, at that time, because of the cold water, it refused to give up the victims. I think there's only a couple maybe that are still alive that remember this. I don't see it, my date. Something about Babe Ruth called it his 22nd home run.
Calvin might be able to tell that. Boy, I might.
He hit 22 home runs a lot often.
Yeah, he certainly did.
And Bonds did his 70th last night.
Well, we're in 2001, and there's a little piece of history right there. And I listened to his interviews and watched his interviews after hitting number 70. Did you ever think you'd live to see somebody hit 70 the first time?
I didn't think I'd going to live to see 70, period.
Oh, never mind.
Not only home runs.
Never mind that. Now it's been done twice, and there'll no doubt be 71 before he's through with this season. All right.
And this is another one that I have that, of course, there's people still live here today, and I say, these 2 individuals were electrocuted here. And it was a tragic situation in that this little fellow walked his father to work, and on the way back there was a power line down, and the kid went over and grabbed it, and this individual here, Adrian LaFountain, Adrian come out of his house, and he saw the little fellow, and he went over there, and he grabbed him, and that where you got number 2. And I had an uncle who lives further down the street. He came out, it was a misty morning, and he had his raincoat, and he just happened to see what was going on. He threw his raincoat down and hit them and broke them up. But there again, it's a small community. Both of these individuals lost their life at that time. And I said it's tragic in that sense that these things happen, but those are the things that make community. You know, I think all of us, in that sense, have things that happen within the framework of the community that are tragic. The railroad here, I'm looking at the number of people who were killed right here in the village with the railroad. I think there's 3 of them.
No kidding.
Yeah. I just got the other day, I found out, I didn't have the exact date on, but I knew it was 1933. And I talked to one of his brothers and got the information for me. We had one that was a fellow, I think, up on the west end, and it's by the name of Dar. And these are the little things that were in the newspaper that, with time, has gone by. He got killed doing that. And then Harry Manley was over here and just on the other side of the powerhouse where he was crossing down into his fields in the afternoon. The train come down through and hit him, and that was it. So it's serious, you know, those little tragedies that happen besides.
There have been a few earthquakes and, you know, a few tremors around the North Country. So these things, like you said, make up the history. What's this photograph here? I like...
Well, this is a...
Oh, that's kind of a neat photograph. What is that?
This is a doctor from Saranac. He came here, and as you can see, he's in in his carriage here.
Yeah.
This is Cook Street. Look at the bank. It's about where the shadow is. You're looking here at Emmons Street going down here to Saranac. And it's like a lot of these things, it's the pictures are faded. You can see where it's been in a frame with a circular.
Yeah.
Circular.
It's a delicious photograph, though.
But you can see the construction, which has changed.
Somebody working on a roof over there.
Yeah.
Maybe on the chimney. I wonder if any of those buildings still exist. Probably
I don't
not.
think so. I think they're all gone. The fires have replaced them and the need for one of the things you had here, in a sense of the community, the prison, in a sense, dictated that from time to time you had these people come up to go over here and inspect the prison. And when the state hospital got started, and way down here there was the Dannemora house, way down in here. But when the governor come, he wasn't going to go down and stay in those places. And you had the house that the Wardens stayed. That was, you know, it was a magnificent building, and it was on right next to the prison. So a lot of the people, when they did come here, they had to stay in places like this, the Dannemora. There was a number of hotels here in Dannemora, like a lot of the others, but it's gone by the board. And incidentally, I don't have that report, but there was one that did, and it was quite instrumental in talking about the situation in the area. It's called the Northern Tourist, and this is one of the most prolific writers. He come up here describing his events coming up on the stagecoach in December.
Ooh.
And you sit there and shiver because he gives you that, and he's telling about this woman coming up here to meet her husband who was being released from the prison, and he then digresses and he goes through and tells you about going into the mine where they're working at, and the inmates were there, and this woman eventually the next day she meets her husband, and he said, you know, 9 years, she said, and you haven't written me. I don't know how she knew that he was getting released from prison, but they stood there up in their knees in snow. She said, like 2 young kids. And it's so interesting to go back and find that lifestyle as compared to today. You know, whisk it out, and then, like I said, we come back to the inner tube stuff where the cars, you head out and don't think anything of driving from Ross's Point, as Leo Loturno used to do every day to come to work. But at that time, it was a big situation, and things have really changed in those cases for the betterment.
Yeah. What else have you got over here that we haven't seen?
One of the things I said here was I did that. These are just typewritten reports on the streets of the village. Most of them, when the prison got started in 1845, they had something to do with those individuals that worked in the prison. Cook, Ransom Cook, came out of Saratoga Springs, and he come up here and he had done a survey for the state of New York to determine the core, or the not only iron, and anything that had to do with geological formations and stuff. And he's the one that more or less decided that Dannemora they put the prison here, keeping it.
So you got to have a Cook Street, right?
Yeah, Cook Street, that's Route 374. And then I did these others way here, like Emmons Street, the one that goes to Saranac. Ebenezer Emmons, who was quite a individual in surveying the Adirondack Mountains. And he became, professor of chemistry. He was at Albany State, Albany Medical, and he went on to work with geologists in North Carolina. And all of the streets, Flag Street here, Smith Street, which is just one out here, Garrett Smith from, his parents were involved in, Garrett ran for, was it vice president for the United States during Lincoln's time?
Could
Garrett
be.
Smith.
Now that you mention it, I think it does ring a bell.
Yeah, Garrett Smith. Well, I got it all here. He would, and he owned a lot of the land within the village here in itself. It said mentioned here that in Dannemora he gave and sold land to St. Joseph's Church.
Ah.
Some of that, I don't see his name on my deed, but I do know that this tract through here that came from some of these Smiths. They had land up in Lake Placid there at John Brown's farm, Timbuktu.
Oh, yes.
And he was an abolitionist, so all of those individuals had things to do with that, the slavery at that time, the Civil War, and those situations which brought up, like I say, that was before the village got started, but there were people who were living here and getting involved in all the things of that time. So
what else we got here? Wait a minute. I want to see some of this stuff. You can't hide this from me. Oh, look at this. President McKinley, 1897, at the Dannemora Railroad. If you think that those striped prison uniforms were just a thing you see in cartoons and old movies, you're wrong. Look at this. Wow.
you can see this was the first railroad station here. Can they take this up? This is the first railroad. Now this through here, it's going down to what is presently the powerhouse. And McKinley had been up to Hotel Champlain. He's on his way up through to Paul Smith's. So evidently they brought him up, and the striped uniforms, that's the inmates.
Yeah.
They must have been playing fine notes that day, because I don't know.
How long did they wear striped uniforms? Do you know?
Up through to, I think, prior World War I.
Did they?
Yeah.
Because, you think of striped uniforms as traditional prison uniforms, and they haven't been worn since the 1915, 1917 era? That's hard to believe.
I think it wasn't around that time that they did that.
Oh, boy. All right. What do you got here?
Well, here's a couple of... Before we're talking about the Wardens House, they tore this down, which is now the entrance to the prison. They had to do this. They had to tear this down because it was cost-wise. And the fact
what a fabulous building.
Yeah.
Look at this.
Him and his wife lived, in most cases, there was only the two of them lived in here. But I said it was a place for individuals who come up to visit the prison. And there was rooms here up at the top, the whole thing. As you can see, here's the wall connected to it.
Yep.
And
That
now
would
here,
have been the 40s. That picture was taken in the early 40s,
Yeah.
mid-40s.
here was one here taken during the wintertime, which it was always a show place in a sense. And it's a lot of people say, well, they shouldn't have taken it down. But because of the fact that the village on Cook Street, the entrance into the prison was just too narrow, and when we changed over from the railroad to bringing individuals into the prison by bus. They got stuck there a couple times, and I remember watching state police out there standing there with shotguns for the better part of an hour while they freed those buses so they could get them in. So they got to do something better than that situation. So they decided to tear the building down in 1970s, I think it was, and to put the present entrance in there. Whether there's plans in the works to eventually take that which is there now and get rid of that whole problem of traffic patterns over here and move it up onto the back of the prison. Well, I got some of this covered up, but this was the first picture of the Wardens House. It was on the grounds within the prison. Seneca Ray Stoddard, this is one of his photos.
Oh, my.
We have some others that he had of that nature. But that was it, and they did away with that. Here was one here. This is the present situation now. Just you can see here's the corner of the building that I just showed you here.
Right.
And they just tore this building down here was the greenhouse. All of this through here was the ward. They had a garden there, and it was really a nice spot. This commissioner come up here. He had been commissioner of the New York City, Murphy, and they put the whole thing in flowers and lights and just a general beautiful spot. It's like I said, they've done away with it, and all of these down here on the wall, they all come out of the Saranac River. And
really?
Yeah, there was a whole thing all the way down here and all the way up through to the back on the entrance of the old prison, and that's done away with. Its time has taken.
Time does that, doesn't it, huh?
And this here, some of these are not the best of photographs. Like I see, some of these have been washed out, but at one time when the inmates were out doing community improvements, they were working on the roads throughout the towns here within there. My father was up there when he was supervisor in Beekmantown. I find where he was using the inmates. They'd go down there and...
That's his picture up on the wall, so that Calvin can swing around and maybe get a shot of that.
That was before he came up here to work in 1920. But this was a community project at that time. All of the towns would use these inmates to grade the roads and stuff, and they saved on the taxpayers, and they were happy to get these individuals. You did have a problem, of course, with people deciding that once they were over there in Ellenberg that...
See, that's not far from the border.
No.
Maybe we can...
And that gets into a whole situation on talking about escapes and things.
Yeah.
This one I got here, I mentioned earlier, and I just see that I had it here, was the stuff on the railroad coming into... This is September 7th, 1878. Narrow versus the standard gauge railroad. And I put these in here as to what happened with the railroads over here. I did copy some of this other, the accounts that were in the newspaper of letters to the editor on the railroad, so that we could have some ideas. It just wasn't everybody didn't agree with where they were going to put that railroad at that time, but it's one of these. So that's the thing here.
How many scrapbooks do you think you've made over the years? Oh, man.
I got out and back. The thing is, what I'm
out and back. I bet you there's a treasure trove out and back.
Is that people look at that and say, well, gee, that's 1887. Yes, but it's there. And if you go down to the college or you go down to the city library and get the microfilm out, you can roll that back down and find it.
Sure.
Oh, you find Grandpa's wedding in there? Sure you can.
Sure you can.
Yeah. And this is what I'm saying is people look at it as a long lost thing. No, it's the same way with the prison. There was state money spent, and so they had to account for it. And if you go to the college library, you can find these reports that were instituted by the warden, and this is what they were doing. And people are so amazed that you can do it. It'll take you some time. If you don't have good dates, then expect to sit there and
Been there and done that. Before the age of the internet, I spent a lot of time in libraries, from New York City to our nation's capital to Plattsburgh, New York, doing research for people, because like you, I love to do the research. And thank goodness now a lot of the information is available on the internet. And I think it's renewing an interest in history that even little children can punch in something on the internet and get an answer, do a lot of their homework based on all the written material like that, and so that's good.
yeah, it's there to be used, and if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
We haven't even begun to touch all the topics here in Dannemora. Is there anything here? Have you got anything here that we haven't seen? Calvin mentioned something very interesting to me, and I'm sure you're aware of this, Terry. By the way, we're talking with Terrence Gilroy here in Dannemora, celebrating its centennial, 100th anniversary of the incorporation of the village of Dannemora. One thing I find interesting, based on what Calvin told me when the camera was off, is that there aren't very many incorporated villages in Clinton County. We counted 4 that we could think of. You think we're right?
Yep.
There aren't very many villages. I thought, I was thinking of Morrisonville. Well, they don't have any government. It's just a hamlet.
Hamlets, Line Mountain. Yeah, Osable is a village. Moores, Ross's Point, Champlain.
Moore's dissolved.
Yes, yeah, that's right too. They
Morris did dissolve.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
Keysville.
Yeah.
Right. The one thing here I brought, and I'd like to show you, talking about
Well, bring it over.
times within the community. This is the riot that we had here in 1929.
Oh yeah, we talked about it before, and I'll just talk while you bring it back over here, so our viewers, will it be easier over here? I think so. Okay. Well,
Terry's mobility is.
just
Oh,
sit
of
down,
course.
Terry. I'll hold it up, or
Oh.
you can stand up, and we can talk about it,
Yeah.
and we'll just get an idea of
Well, again,
what we're looking at. Go ahead. I'll
What,
hold the
uh,
microphone.
what I did was I used these newspaper clippings to put together on here, so that if you put this someplace, you can have an idea of what happened. Over here, you can see here's a baseball game being advertised for June 23rd, 1929, at the Prison Diamond. And I think we're playing Osable Forks.
I love
We do have one here. This one's here. Clinton team walloped by Mountaineers. They know those guys on Line Mountain. They weren't joshing. But I called up and said, "Well, I got this here. Here's the list of those people that were playing baseball with Line Mountain that day." And I think they already had that. They've done some work up there. But this is here, like 3 killed in Dannemora. And this is the Daily Republican of all of this stuff that was taking place during that particular time. And see, here's a photograph here. I don't have them here, but I do. Pete Light found these photographs that we do have that are available of the riot during that time. One of the things was they used the Morrisonville Fire Department come up here, and you can. This picture doesn't show it, but one of the others we do, where they were burning the buildings, and they asked for help, and Morrisonville Murph Light come up here for it, and he's probably one of the very few individuals that's around that. Yeah, I remember that well, and said they lined the wall. You can see the officers up here on the wall. And like I say, it was a trying time because these inmates are over there. They can't see them, but they know that, there's my uncle, or there's my grandfather, there's my brother, whatever. They're up there. And these guys were, they weren't singing songs to them. And, of course, the officers, they had rifles and stuff, and they were making use of it also. So it was a very touchy time here within the village in 1929 when these things occurred. And I said, just to put this together so that it could be available, anybody wants to read it. And not only that, this accounted when it went out of the village, and you can find reports. We have here the New York Times, the whole account of that. The other newspapers of the nation also covered it, as you would expect, because here's these individuals rebelling against the authority within the institution. And it said 3 killed. One of them, which brings up another thing, was that very shortly thereafter, I have it here, one of the individuals who was injured in this account, he winds up about 4 months later trying to escape. And right off Cook Street, he gets up there, and him and the officer that are assigned to the wall tower, they were equal distance from the Thompson submachine gun. And they had a battle royal. The only thing was that, found out that this individual, Tom Brannigan, come down, and he drew his gun in the institution, come down and standing there on Cook Street, and he see what was going on, and he shot the inmate. And then Jerry got the submachine gun, and he went up one side of him and down the other. And Jerry had to know Jerry was quite Irish. What happened, Jerry? He said, well, it was either him or me. It was him. And that was Jerry's account of the whole situation. But all of these things here, the village people are involved in, like I say.
Of course they are. In a community this size,
Yeah.
very much so.
And it's one of those situations, like I said before, with the drownings at Shazy Lake and the electrocution of these individuals, that put this community, you're always kind of in the back of your mind, like at the Twin Towers. Those people there, it's in the back of your mind that those our daughter-in-laws are working in the city. And when you get off ground floor and you're working on 46th or 64th or 75th floor, those people in the back of their mind are worrying whether that could have ever happened to them. And I think this is the same thing here when you don't mention it, but it could happen. Yeah, it could happen.
Yeah. What else have you got on the easel over here? Just some newspaper stuff, huh?
Well, this is a account here
Let me hold
to
this
show
up
the
again.
1957, 53, and Press Republican again, but it's just community of advertisers and the Dannemora State Hospital and these people who work here and lived here. Dr. Buck's father, Buck's Corners down here in Saranac. And just another one of those articles that relates about life here within the village and how it's changed. And I said to put it there. I should have it laminated, to be honest with you, to preserve it. And the other thing here, talking of tragedies within...
That's some neat stuff there.
Expenses.
Oh, the price is 69 cents for butter? I'm sorry. Didn't mean to throw it down on you.
Yeah.
We always look for the ads, don't we? Huh?
Yeah. Well, that's one thing in doing World War II. I put this stuff in photo albums, and I always included these things which would document that which has changed. Well, let's see. Jarvis's Pontiac, Bob Jarvis's father ran the garage.
Yeah.
And for $10.75, you could get a 1949 Pontiac. So, here's Kingstown.
$1,075, yeah.
Yeah.
Buy a new Ford for $1,200 to $1,500 in 1950. I remember my dad buying one at that time. Union Chiefs.
This was the, I laminated this because this is the strike we had here in the prison. Sorry to say that if you read the history,
This way.
if you read the history of Clinton Prison, you won't find this mentioned. And basically, this is the reason that I decided to do this. 1979, November 20th. It isn't complimentary to the Union Chiefs with Jerry Werfel here, Al, as they explained here, that really the strike in 79, which again brought all of the people in the community and those who worked here for days on that strike line. And it, it really wasn't the best of times. And I said a lot of the people that work here know what existed. This picture here shows the state police as they're coming out with a National Guard at that time. I don't think you'll ever see this happen again. It's just one of those things that progresses through times. And I think that...
Female guards rethought?
Yeah.
Look at that headline.
Yeah. So that was in the beginning when they were bringing females in to work for in the Department of Correction. Whether it's one of those things that will always be considered by some as being negative and others as a positive.
Come on over here and sit down again. We'll continue our conversation. It's true, because I can remember when females first became police officers in this area. We're going to continue in just a moment. All right, what have you got in this particular book?
This is the report from the New York Times.
1929.
July 23rd. And it gives we just typed this up rather than leave it in its original state in the New York Times. But talking about the situation here as to the riot of 1929. Mm-hmm. And like over here, you do have listed the names of those individuals who were dead and those that were wounded. And here's the one here that you're just telling you about with Jerry Callahan. Now, why this individual was allowed to run to the degree he did and wind up getting killed within a few months later. And we did, like the other papers, we do come over here, and here's the photographs that I was talking about.
Oh, my.
And you can see the smoke here from the buildings that were burning. This is the east wall, and you notice some of the vehicles that are here that were... These came from Pete Light. Here's the fire truck you can see over here in the corner.
Oh, my.
But they're all in the same...
General area.
General area, in the Dannemora State Hospital, which is the annex now, right over here on the very end. And at that time also, this was the picture here taken when Governor Franklin Roosevelt came here afterwards to survey the situation. This is over at the annex now. Mm-hmm. And the commissioner here for corrections and the governor and the warden at that time, Harry Kaiser. And this was the deputy warden over here at that time. So he came here to make a report afterward. He was in the area anyway. I think he was in Plattsburgh. He'd been in northern New York. The governor had to check these situations out over in Messina and things. And I know a couple of years ago we had a report over in Canton we went over to, and that was what they were doing. The theme was on Roosevelt's governorship. So this wound up, as I said, was quite an exciting time when these people went out of their natural habitat and tried to take over the institute. This picture here was of the wardens at that time. We have here, this is Murphy, Frank Murphy, not Frank, he was the warden here. Dr. Webster, who was at the Dannemora State Hospital, and this is Dr. Webster right here in that one. So these were all of the state wardens. Had the one here for Attica, which was just starting Hunt, and then I had my uncle who was from Beavertown. He went down there and he was the deputy warden, and then when Louis Laws died, he went over and he was warden at Sing Sing for a while till he died. Well, but these are reports that were written for the college for Dr. Everest, and gives information as to the riot and what some of these other things that took place.
Now let's talk about schools. While we have a few minutes left on our tape recording, about 2 minutes, let's give a little brief history of the schools here.
Well, like all people, you want to get the children educated, and the restrictions here, in a sense, when you came to accepting employment here, the state demanded that you have, your requirements, and they wanted people who had a high school education, which led the people that come here to have a high school education, and then they would demand of their children, their siblings, that they do better than they did. And so it was just a natural progression that we had a lot of the people here wanted this, and we missed out when we decided to put the school here. The Ellenburg had started. They got federal aid. Where was someplace else? But Dannemora didn't. And the people wanted to do this, so they bonded together and formed a union free school district and kept this up. The only thing was that Bertrand Snell, during the Depression, he held the bonds on that. And so when we come to centralization with Saranac, we found out that we had to pay off all those bonds from the 1932 school, plus anything we would do with centralization with Saranac. And there was a lot of people who didn't want to pay double taxation and cents. And so it wound up.
Yeah, we're just changing tapes for a moment there, and you were right in the middle of talking about the merger.
Well, the merger came, and like I said, here the people were within the district, and they were obligated to pay those debts off that Bertrand Snell had put on the school district from the Depression. It was a 30-year note, and it ran up through into the 1960s. Well, then when they got talking of doing this, what I should back up a minute. They had decided they were going to do this school and were going to centralize it. Well, the people in Dannemora found out that, we were going to pay this other debt off with any debt they assumed from Saranac. So they reneged. Well, they had a meeting in Albany, and nobody here went to the meeting. There was a man from Saranac that was there, and when they come out to open the meeting, he was the only one there. They said, well, come on in, Mr. So-and-so. You got the school. Well, that aggravated the people here. And then you had some that said, well, they don't want this centralization to take place because it's going to lower the homes here, the value in this district. And we had been a community where, like I say, with all of these other little individuals, the riot, the strike, not the strike, but some of these other things happening, the people were there, and they were more of a community-minded spirit. And so they wanted to stick together. And they would vote this down. Not that there was any difference between the good people in Saranac as there was in Dannemora. It was just that these additional things were playing on their mind, and they didn't want to do it. We had people who, and it's to show you the similarity, when they decided to put the water line from the prison over to Chazy Lake in the early 1930s, they said to the people here, we will lay your water line with that of the state. You'll have to have your own pump house and things over there. But as long as we're going to dig it up, feel free to lay yours. No, we don't want it. They turned down an offer after the riot when they put the new powerhouse in. They're running the power lines to the prison and the state hospital, provide water, electricity, steam, and all of that stuff. On the return lines, they come down and they're building the school, this brick school I'm telling you about, and said, we'll give you that return line. No, thank you, we can't rely on it. And if you go up there, you can still see the steam. The steam is still escaping into the air, which could have been used to have covered the cost of heat in the school. But we assumed those things in hindsight, So they lost out, and a lot of it was the cost. People were on a fixed income, and up to very short time ago, a lot of these things, it was that additional, especially people who only had one income. And so we get into this centralization, and some stuff was based because the people here didn't like the people there. Well, I don't think that really was it, because you look, there's so many marriages and everything else that cooperate between the two communities that it wasn't that. It was just that this additional cost was something they wanted to consider, and we were going to lose that identity. And I think that since the centralization, where we had basketball and that spirit during the wintertime of people going there and being associated with it, that you've lost that community spirit. It's not there anymore. We have the Dannemora Youth Commission, but you don't have that. Well, Dannemora is going to play Plattsburgh High tonight, and we did. I can see here in some of the other things that I have where we play them, and we have a situation where we only had, let's say at one time, 17 kids go out for basketball. 7 of us wound up on the varsity, 10 wound up in the junior varsity. And we played St. John, MAI, PHS, Ross's Point, Line Mountain, and we were competitive. And so these things all build up, and we had this, and it continued on into that situation where we're going to be dictated to by the state education department. You're going to send your children to Saranac. Like, we're going to decide what we want. The people here decided they had enough in the beginning. They wanted to build that school, and it would be strictly on the taxpayers' back within the district to do it. And so they did it. And they didn't need any help. They could have used it, but they didn't get it. So we'll still be obnoxious and remain with that situation. So that's where we wound up. And Dannemora fought the fight, and we lost the battle, but we gained in a sense. We had a lot of good things with the people in Saranac. And as again, it comes back to one of those things where you have a problem within a community, like I say, with the riot and these things here, that shows the spirit of the people that have lived here. They're not any better, nor are they any worse. They're just community-minded, and they like to know what's going to happen. And so this is why some look at it as being a negative factor, but I don't think it should be considered. Now we get talking here about, you ask about this situation here where Dannemora, the town of Dannemora, this being in the Saranac, and it's true, the village of Dannemora, the lot line here should be right out there on Smith Street. But, and as I showed here in this book here, doing this stuff in 1845, excuse me, here can...
Okay. Amazing how things happen right on time. The doorbell rang. Alice Light was here. Pete had sent over some maps and some wonderful things, and it just happened that this great old map was in the collection that he sent over for us to talk about today. And you were right in the middle of talking about the village being, part of it being in the town of Saranac. Now, explain that to me.
Correct, yeah. Dannemora, the village, is located within the town of Dannemora and also the town of Saranac. As we've come out before and mentioned about the Canadian Nova Scotia Refugee Tract, you can see where these show up in here. But what happened here was that in doing this, we go back to that original book I had of 1844 to 1864, I think it was. It showed that there were people who at that time looked at the line for the division between the two towns to show that the district line should be further south than it is. These called freeholders wanted it straightened out. It has never been corrected.
Never been straightened out.
It should be, from what we understand.
You don't know where you are right now, do you?
Well, I'm in. I pay.
Let's get this big map up here. This is a wonderful map. You tell me when you've captured it.
Well, he's going to point. So.
Okay, you're going to point. Okay, let me stand up. Okay.
Well, here we are with the line right here.
This is a nice map, you think, huh?
Yeah, and I think we had this for the Centennial, which locates each and every house within the village of Dannemora.
That's pretty neat.
And anything that they would have encompass in doing work within these boundary lines. And this being the dotted line here, the separation between the village here in the town of Dannemora and the village being in the town of Saranac. But when they did here a survey a few years ago up on the west end near the reservoir, these people came in and found out that, again, the line is not where it should be. It should be some 500 feet further to the south.
It's a long ways. 500 feet's a long ways.
Well, it's like a lot of these things when they did these maps at that time, they probably it wasn't that much of a difference. But then over a mile, 2 miles, it adds up to X number of feet. And so it hasn't been changed. And
So where do you think it should be? Behind your house instead of in
Behind.
front of it?
yes, yeah. But whether it ever will be is another consideration. And I mentioned this to some people, and they were all enthused about it. And then it gets to the point where it just gets to be old information, and nothing has ever transpired with it.
This is the only place in the world where this kind of a controversy has developed. We should say we've seen it in many towns
Yeah.
around the countryside over the years where things are resurveyed, and sometimes the powers that be just decided, oh my God,
Yeah, it's a
let's
good-
not get into that.
that's the thing there. Yeah, town of Plattsburgh there on the prison road and things with the town of
Oh
Saranac.
yeah, that big controversy is still going on
Yeah.
as we speak.
I think Saranac Lake wanted to get in and in one county, and instead of being in Essex and Franklin, and these things, of course, it's cumbersome to get these things changed. But that's about the sum and substance to it. That this was off in the beginning, and these people tried in the 1840s to correct it, but it never went any further. And here we are today in 2001, and it remains the same.
Isn't that amazing? Let me put this down for a second and see what other little tidbits that Peter brought us. He brought us pick that up because that's kind of a neat depiction of the prison, right?
Yeah, this is the map of 1869. Here you have the subscribers of the businesses within the thing. Here's again Cook Street, Ransom Cook. Here's what we were just talking about, Smith Street, Garrett Smith, which is the dividing line between the two communities. And these are the little houses that were here at that time. You can see the Methodist Church, ME. Methodist Church was over here, where the schoolhouse is today. They moved that over here in 1929. Here's the ME Church Parsonage. They moved this across the Cumberland over here to this location. The communities, the other places were business places, and the homes located as outlined here. It didn't seem to do much with this area here to the west. Now, see, they got like it's a school number 1. And I talked to a fellow the other day, and nothing really seems to come up on that. And I don't have anything there either. The mine, which started, was over here in this area here. You can see this broken line indicates the outline of the wall, and it went all the way around. Here's the guard station number 5 way up and back, the magazine for dynamiting, guardhouse number 4, and back on the east side. Principally, the institution hasn't changed that much. Here was the main part of the prison at that time, 1869. There's the principal keeper's house, the physician's residence. As I said before, showed you the picture of the agent's residence. These people here, this was the road going up through to Shazy Lake. That since has been disbanded. It's gone up and continues now on 374. But these were the people who lived here. S.W. Allen, Seth Allen, who was one of the first mayors within the village. Allen and Cunningham, they ran a business, like I said before. They were 2 of the postmasters who were here, one being Democrat, the other being Republican. And when the situations changed in Washington, the postmastership went back and forth from one side of the building to the other, which is now right about in here where Ting's Tavern was at that time. Allen and Cunningham, and then they became Lou Buck Paper in Plattsburgh. And Bucks made quite a bit of money when they decided to incorporate the balance of they stole this land off, abandoned the mine. They straightened the line out for the prison from north to south, and they put in a cement wall. And as I understand it, Lou Buck had the dealership for Portland Cement, so he got X number of money for each bag of cement that went in. And then after that was completed, they decided to go to Plattsburgh and get involved in Buck's paper. But that's where Ting's Tavern is, and Allen and Cunningham were there. So we're still trying to locate some of these people, like I said, doing the biographies on the mayors, and see what we can come up with on that.
Well, it's never done, is
Yeah.
it? The study of history is never done.
Bauk Street here. This is I said we were talking about the streets in the village. Bauk Street. He was the governor at that time. He came up here, and I don't know if I shouldn't laugh, but I don't think you could get the present governors to do what he did. This fellow come up up to Keysville, and Governor Bauk wanted to come up here and see what the prison was. They were just starting this, so he got somebody to drive him from Keysville. And they come down, they got him up into Katyville. And Governor Bauk and the guy on well, not the driver, but the other, they walked all the way up to view this prison and then walk back. That's Harkness, from Harkness, New York.
Oh, my.
And that's what Smith, Flag, FLA, GG, he was involved in the Battle of Plattsburgh, 1812. We've never come up with anything on Barker Street. This was changed, Mason Street. This fellow lived right here. There's Mason. He worked in the prison, so that was Emmons, as you can see here at that time, was marked Saranac Street. Yeah, and they changed it. I don't know. I never found out, but they changed it from Saranac Street to Emmons. And of course, the others they've added in since then as the villages developed. But this is principally what we had here as a community.
Nice old map, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Pete, let's say Pete.
sit down over here and rest a minute while we wrap up our show. Let's see what other little goodies he might have delivered to us here today through Alice, his emissary. Oh, my. Look at this. There's a construction site. He's got some wonderful stuff.
Going to share it with us?
Yes, I am. I'm just going to try to see whether I think this may be when they were building the wall here. Do you think, or what is that?
It's
Let me get a shot. We can talk
Yeah,
about it
let's
later.
get a shot about it. We'll try to figure out what it is. I have no clue. Do you?
well, a lot of this, the work, the word I'm looking for, is trying to come up with the stone for the buildings here.
Oh, yeah.
See, like some of the wall here. If you look at this wall,
All right, take a look at this one.
this is the front wall. It's covered up now. What happened was they put the original fence was picket fence,
Yeah.
and in front of the picket fence they put a line of trees to cover it, and then eventually the wind blew them down, and they had to replace them. So they decided, well, they got to do something different. So they come up with this idea of putting in a stone wall, and this stone wall, as you can see here, the little things. These are, if you go near the underpass in Katyville, that's where the stone came from.
No,
Over
yeah.
and back, that's all of this stone wall there. And since then, they just covered it up.
Just covered it up,
Yeah.
but it's in there.
Yeah. But there's the original entrance to the prison.
Yeah.
It's been covered up now. But this was a governor's visit here. Ah, can't think of the name. I got it someplace else.
Oh, that's all right.
But it's just, here you can see the tracks of the, let's see.
Oh,
This is the railroad.
Dannemora Railroad. Oh, there's a great shot.
Yep. There's the village got a hold of the building when D&H decided to abandon the line. And
Oh,
I-
that's nice.
Yep. If I get my stuff together, I got one where it shows just west of there. It was in the wintertime, and you can see the train coming from Line Mountain and the smoke as it's
Oh, that
going
beautiful
back.
shot, huh?
Roy Banker was quite a individual.
The Wardens House, built in 1890, Victorian architecture and elaborate flower gardens. That's kind of a nice
This one
shot.
here is I'd like to explain a little. This is the present entrance to the institution. Now, as we pointed out with these others, this is it now being. It was a garden. I don't know who the warden was here at the time. I think it was Tremblay from Altoona. But what shows up here, this building over here in the back, is the second schoolhouse. The first schoolhouse was on that, which is in Maggie's pharmacy. As the increase in population occurred, the prison being enlarged and the state hospital coming online, more people came here to live. Well, they decided to do away with the first schoolhouse, which became the firehouse. This was the second one. And it was over there. They had that up there, and the Knights of Columbus bought it around 1920. Then in the 40s, they sold it, and the government bought it. They were going to put a post office, which they never did. But that documents the second schoolhouse. I don't know, like I said, with that other, what this is here up on the west end of the village, and this is schoolhouse number 1. We have no idea as to what that is, but this was the schoolhouse for a great number of years.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, he just sent us something. That's a very nice poster that somebody put together
That the village used that for
for the centennial. Yeah,
the centennial.
So might as well get a shot out of it as we wrap up our program today.
This was the logo we used here, which we combined with all of the things, the pick here for iron, the railroad, of course, going through here, the schools, the prison, that which associated itself with the village of Dannemora from its inception. We didn't put the water lines in because we figured that was a little too hard. We just let them out. But that's
Oh, boy.
1901 to 2001.
Just because our little session is wrapping up here today, I don't want our viewers to ever think that the study of history ends, because we're making history. Every moment we take a breath, we're making a little piece of history. Chances are excellent, if the good Lord is willing and the creek doesn't rise too far, we'll get to do another chapter here in Dannemora, because this man, as you can easily tell, has more words inside him than he can get out sometime. There's just so much to know and so much to learn. But it's been a great passion for you over the years, hasn't it?
Yes, because I was interested in doing this. Like I said, started out with trying to find out what the name Dannemora meant. And I go down, and the easy way to do that is to go to the village office and say, where's this book that explains this? And the woman's there at the time, Mrs. Reel, we don't have anything. Well, what do you mean you don't have anything? Well, nobody bothered to do it. So that's when I got onto it, and then one thing
got to do it, huh?
And one thing developed into another. I find we get into talking with Dannemora, Sweden, and then when I find out, like 1844, these things are available there. Let's put it together. Let's see what we come up with. And then I didn't continue that, because after we went to Florida, and I find out in the 1860s that I had accomplished this, I can do what we did in World War II. And that's where I got off onto doing World War II from Clinton County. And I spent X number of years doing that. And it's more or less, it's some of these things. People come up, and like you said, with the internet, they're interested in these things, and they let you know that it's available. And I haven't got on the internet because I haven't had the time. And I know that diversifying myself, would you become historian for the town of Dannemora? No, thank you. Not that I have anything against it, but I just don't find that I had accomplished what I wanted with the village to get into the town of Dannemora and Shazy Lake. So that's basically why I got onto it. And probably my wife wished that I'd gone raising Cain instead of...
Well, we thank all those people who do study history and perpetuate the love of knowing where we've been. It pleases me to see young people studying history, and to young people getting into historian stuff, so that they can put a lot of these things that we have here on a website.
Yeah.
And if we can inspire anybody who is viewing this program from all over northern New York to get started in studying your own history, set up a website for your little community so the rest of us can just type in Village of Dannemora and see all of this stuff. We don't want them to do it too quick, because we like to think we're making a pretty good presentation right here on Hometown Cable. And we are. But that's the wave of the future. So all this stuff can be collected. And when you say, I think I had that somewhere, and you got that little mouse in your right hand, you say, click.
Yeah.
And there it is. That's pretty neat. You won't have to look in the back room. I can't even imagine what a project that would be for some young person to come and look in the back here. He keeps pointing this way. How many tons of stuff have you got this way? Lots of stuff, huh?
As I said, I sit down there and go through the microfilm and put this stuff together, as I tried to explain, to make it available so you can have. But you people here, both of you, your satisfaction in doing this for the love of this, and also the fact that these people who will look at this and realize what you've done to enhance this program.
Well,
and
that's a whole nother chapter.
yeah, but you deserve credit for it, and I know that that I haven't got my thank you cards out, but I do appreciate it, and I know the others do also, who are at least anywhere interested in these things, know that you're doing a commendable service, and I would like to wholeheartedly ask for their support in doing this, so that we can, people can
Thank you.
do more even, as you will.
That's what it takes. It'll take, as I've mentioned, without belaboring it too much, we have to find more underwriters to help us out with the wherewithal so that we can travel farther. This program is now being aired on several cable systems. Recently, we understand that it's starting to be aired by Charter Communications on the same schedule with Channel 15 up in the Upper J, or Sable area, so those people can find out what we've been doing. We've interviewed some wonderful people from that neck of the woods, and we like to do more far-ranging things, and we hope that this relationship between Calvin and myself and people like you can continue for many years in the future. And of course, we revere the memory of the late Bob Venn, who started this whole thing with Calvin and did hundreds and hundreds of these programs, which from time to time will be aired on your local cable system. Terry Gilroy, thank you so much for allowing us to come into your house. Yes, he remembers his wife's name is Gert. Just because she wasn't here today, we have to. She's down helping out where? The medical center today?
Coffee shop.
In the coffee shop at the medical center. But she's a good solid 50% or 54% of this relationship, right?
Well, your fractions are awful loose. I think it's 90-40.
Oh, 90-40, yeah.
No math.
My fractions have always been loose. We love to come up here in the fall of the year, and I want you both to have a tremendous time down in Florida this winter. Next year, when you got back, you got the whole winter to dream up some new chapter, whatever the chapter might be, for a future program, and we'll get into this again, won't we?
Hope so. Thank you.
I do. Terry, thank you so much. Thanks to Calvin for hauling that camera on his shoulder. It's a wonder he doesn't have a dent there with all the things he does. But it's enjoyable for all of us. And I wouldn't trade these moments for any other moments in my life. They're just wonderful. And for you out there, who knows where we're going to be next time.